Deep beneath the ancient peaks of the Appalachian Mountains, in a landscape of mist-shrouded valleys and forests so dense that sunlight barely penetrates to the forest floor, there are said to exist passageways and chambers that extend for miles through solid rock. These are not the well-documented limestone caves found throughout the region, not the tourist attractions with paved walkways and electric lights, but something far more mysterious and controversial. A network of tunnels and underground structures that some claim were built by human hands in the distant past, creating what amounts to a subterranean city hidden beneath the mountains of North Carolina. The stories have circulated for centuries, passed down through Cherokee oral traditions, whispered in the accounts of early European settlers, documented in fragmentary historical records, and perpetuated in local folklore that refuses to die despite the skepticism of mainstream archaeology. These accounts speak of vast underground chambers accessible through hidden entrances in remote mountain locations, of passageways that connect distant points beneath the surface, of strange carvings and constructed features that suggest purposeful engineering rather than natural formation. Some versions of the legend describe these underground spaces as ancient refuges, built by unknown peoples in prehistory as shelter from enemies or catastrophes. Other versions emphasize their sacred or ceremonial nature, portraying them as temples or ritual spaces of immense spiritual significance. Still others suggest more exotic origins, invoking lost civilizations, advanced ancient technologies, or even connections to the Hollow Earth theories that captivated imaginations in earlier centuries. The skeptical response to these claims has been dismissive and often scornful. Mainstream archaeology and geology regard the stories as folklore, as misidentifications of natural caves, as exaggerations and elaborations built on kernels of truth, but lacking any substantial foundation in fact. There is no credible evidence, skeptics argue, for large-scale artificial tunnel systems beneath the Appalachians, no archaeological documentation of subterranean cities, no geological plausibility for the claimed extent and sophistication of the structures. Yet the legends persist, and they persist with remarkable consistency across different sources and time periods. Cherokee traditions speak specifically of underground passages and chambers in certain mountain locations. Early settler accounts from the 18th and 19th centuries describe encounters with tunnel-like openings and underground spaces that seemed too regular to be natural. Modern explorers and investigators continue to claim discoveries of anomalous features that defy easy explanation. This investigation will examine the evidence for and against the existence of significant artificial tunnel systems beneath the North Carolina Appalachians. We will explore the legends in detail, trace their historical development, examine the geological context that makes some version of the claims plausible while ruling out others, investigate documented tunnel and cave systems in the region, and consider what modern exploration and research have revealed. The goal is not to prove or disprove the most sensational versions of the legend, but rather to understand what truth, if any, lies beneath the layers of folklore and exaggeration. Are there genuine mysteries in the Appalachian underground that deserve serious investigation? Or are the legends entirely products of imagination, misunderstanding, and wishful thinking? What can we actually know about underground spaces in the region, and what must remain in the realm of speculation? If you are intrigued by this journey beneath the mountains, into the intersection of legend and reality, folklore and investigation, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to explore these mysterious corners of history and bring you thorough, balanced investigations of claims that mainstream sources often dismiss without examination. Now, let us descend into the legendary underground realm beneath the Appalachians. To understand the legends of underground structures in the Appalachians, we must first understand the landscape itself, because the physical characteristics of this ancient mountain range create both the plausibility and the mystery surrounding underground spaces. The Appalachian Mountains are among the oldest mountain ranges on Earth, formed approximately 480 million years ago during a series of continental collisions that geologists call the Appalachian orogeny. At their formation, these mountains rivaled the Himalayas in height, rising perhaps as high as 20,000 feet. But hundreds of millions of years of erosion have worn them down to their current modest elevations, typically between 3,000 and 6,000 feet, with the highest peak, Mount Mitchell in North Carolina, reaching 6,684 feet. This ancient age and extensive erosion are crucial for understanding the underground landscape. The mountains we see today are essentially the eroded roots of much larger mountains. The rocks exposed at the surface were once deep underground, subjected to immense pressure and heat that transformed them into metamorphic formations: gneiss, schist, slate, and marble. The region's geology is complex, with multiple rock types in close proximity, extensive folding and faulting from the ancient mountain-building processes, and intrusions of different mineral-bearing formations. This geological complexity creates natural underground spaces through several mechanisms. Limestone and marble formations, scattered throughout the Appalachians, are subject to dissolution by slightly acidic groundwater, creating classic karst landscapes with caves, underground streams, and sinkholes. The Appalachians contain thousands of documented caves, with new discoveries made regularly. Some of these caves are extensive, with passages running for miles through the limestone. Fracture caves form in metamorphic and igneous rocks along zones of weakness created by faulting, folding, and cooling. These are typically smaller and less continuous than limestone caves, but they can be extensive in areas of intense geological deformation. Talus caves form where massive boulders have tumbled down mountainsides and come to rest in configurations that create passageways and chambers beneath the boulder piles. Some talus cave systems in the Appalachians extend for considerable distances. This combination of geological factors means that natural underground spaces are common in the Appalachian landscape. Any resident of the region knows about caves, many of which have been used by humans for shelter, storage, and various purposes for thousands of years. But the legends of artificial tunnels and constructed underground chambers claim something beyond natural cave formation. They claim purposeful human engineering, extensive networks connecting multiple locations, and structures that show signs of deliberate construction, carved walls, regular dimensions, architectural features. The question is whether the undeniable existence of natural caves has been conflated, confused, or elaborated into legends of artificial tunnel systems, or whether there is a genuine core of truth involving human modification or construction of underground spaces. The most culturally significant and historically deep accounts of underground spaces in the Appalachians come from the Cherokee people, whose ancestors inhabited the region for thousands of years before European contact, and whose oral traditions preserve knowledge of the landscape extending back into deep time. Cherokee cosmology divides the world into three realms: the upper world of sky and celestial beings, the middle world of earth and everyday life, and the underworld beneath the surface. This underworld is not simply a spiritual concept, but is understood to have physical manifestations in caves, springs, and underground waters. In Cherokee tradition, caves and underground spaces are inherently powerful and potentially dangerous places, thresholds between the middle world and the underworld, dwelling places of spirits and forces that must be approached with respect and proper protocol. They are not merely geological features, but are sacred landscapes, places where the boundary between ordinary reality and spiritual reality becomes thin. Within this general framework of caves as sacred spaces, there are specific Cherokee traditions about particular underground locations in the North Carolina mountains. Some of these traditions speak of passages and chambers of exceptional extent and significance, places that were known to ancestors and that held particular importance for ceremonies, refuge, or accessing spiritual power. The ethnographer James Mooney, who worked extensively with Cherokee communities in North Carolina in the 1880s and 1890s, recorded traditions about caves and underground spaces. His informants described caves that extended deep into particular mountains, caves with multiple chambers and connecting passages, and caves that held special significance in Cherokee history and spirituality. One tradition collected by Mooney describes a cave system in a specific mountain. The exact location is not specified in his published work, possibly to protect sacred sites, that was said to extend for great distances, with passages leading to chambers where ceremonies were conducted and where powerful spiritual presences dwelt. The tradition emphasizes that only those with proper knowledge and spiritual preparation should enter these deep places, as danger awaited the unprepared. Another tradition speaks of underground refuges used by Cherokee people during times of warfare or persecution. During the forced removal known as the Trail of Tears in the 1830s, some Cherokee families hid in remote mountain locations to avoid being rounded up and marched to Oklahoma. Oral traditions within Cherokee families speak of caves and underground places used as hiding spots during this traumatic period, places where families could shelter for extended periods, hidden from soldiers searching the mountains. These traditions raise important questions about interpretation. When Cherokee traditions speak of extensive cave systems, of passages connecting distant locations, of underground chambers used for ceremony or refuge, are they describing actual physical features that could be verified through exploration? Or are they using geographic and physical language to describe spiritual realities and cultural knowledge? The answer is likely both. Cherokee traditions are not neatly separable into literal physical descriptions versus purely spiritual metaphors. They integrate physical landscape with spiritual significance, historical memory with mythological interpretation, in ways that Western categories of fact versus fiction do not capture well. What we can say is that Cherokee traditions clearly establish that caves and underground spaces in specific locations in the North Carolina mountains held profound significance, that some of these spaces were known to be extensive and complex, and that they were used for purposes including ceremony, refuge, and accessing spiritual knowledge. Whether these traditions describe artificial tunnels and constructed chambers, or whether they describe natural cave systems that were culturally important and perhaps modified by human use, cannot be determined from the oral traditions alone. We need to examine the physical evidence. When European settlers began moving into the North Carolina mountains in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, they encountered not only the physical landscape, but also the Cherokee knowledge of that landscape, including information about caves and underground spaces. Some early settler accounts include descriptions of caves or tunnel-like openings that the settlers found remarkable, anomalous, or puzzling. These accounts appear in various sources: personal letters, local histories, newspaper articles, and memoirs written decades after the events described. One account, appearing in a county history compiled in the 1880s, describes a settler's discovery in the early 1800s of an opening in a remote mountain area that led to a passage with surprisingly regular dimensions and smooth walls. The account states that the settler explored for some distance with torch light before turning back, fearing to go deeper without companions. When he returned with others to explore further, he claimed he could not relocate the entrance, which had either been concealed by a rockfall or which he simply could not find again in the difficult terrain. Another account from the same general period describes hunters discovering a cave entrance that led to a large chamber with what they described as carved markings on the walls. The markings were not typical scratches or natural features, but appeared to be deliberate symbols or writing. The hunters reported the discovery, but subsequent attempts to relocate the cave were unsuccessful. These accounts share common features: remote locations, difficulty in relocating the sites, descriptions of features that seemed anomalous or artificial, and lack of follow-up documentation. Skeptics point to these features as evidence that the accounts are unreliable, that if significant discoveries had been made, they would have been documented more thoroughly, and the sites would have been rediscovered. But defenders of the accounts note that the mountainous terrain of the region genuinely makes it possible to find something and then fail to relocate it. The densely forested, topographically complex landscape contains countless hollows, ridges, and rock formations that look similar. landmarks can be obscured by seasonal vegetation changes. And in the 18th and 19th centuries, there were no detailed maps, no GPS coordinates, no systematic surveys that would allow precise relocation of features. Moreover, some settlers may have had incentives not to publicize or precisely document discoveries. If you found a cave that might contain valuable minerals or artifacts, revealing its location could lead to others claiming it. If you found something that frightened or disturbed you, you might prefer to leave it alone and not speak about it openly. The settler accounts, taken individually, are anecdotal and impossible to verify. But taken collectively, they establish a pattern. European settlers in the region encountered underground features that struck them as unusual or significant, and these encounters fed into developing folklore about mysterious tunnels and chambers beneath the mountains. Among the legends of the region, one of the most persistent and intriguing concerns the Moon-Eyed people, a race of beings said to have inhabited the mountains in ancient times before the Cherokee arrival. According to this legend, recorded by early historians and preserved in regional folklore, the Moon-Eyed people were a pale-skinned race who could not see well in daylight, but had excellent vision in darkness or moonlight, hence their name. They were said to live in structures built underground or in deep caves, venturing to the surface only at night or in the dim light of dawn and dusk. The Cherokee, according to the legend, encountered the Moon-Eyed people when they first arrived in the region and eventually drove them out or exterminated them in warfare. Some versions of the legend claim that the Moon-Eyed people fled deeper into the mountains or deeper underground, and that they or their descendants might still exist in hidden refuges. The Moon-Eyed people legend has been the subject of much speculation and creative interpretation. Some have suggested they were albinos or people with a genetic condition causing light sensitivity. Others have proposed they were a real distinct ethnic group, possibly European explorers or settlers who arrived in North America before known historical contacts. Still others have suggested Norse visitors, Welsh explorers associated with the Prince Madoc legend, or even more exotic origins. Mainstream historians and anthropologists generally dismiss the Moon-Eyed people as purely legendary, a mythological construction with no basis in actual history. They point out that similar legends of pre-existing peoples displaced by later arrivals exist in many cultures and serve narrative functions, explaining archaeological remains, legitimizing territorial claims, or providing mythological opponents for hero stories. However, some researchers have noted that Cherokee oral traditions do refer to peoples who inhabited the region before Cherokee arrival, and that there is archaeological evidence of pre-Cherokee cultures in the southern Appalachians. The question is whether the Moon-Eyed people legend preserves any genuine historical memory of these earlier peoples, and whether any of the legend's details, particularly the underground dwelling, have factual basis. The connection to our investigation is direct. If there are artificial underground structures or extensively modified caves in the region, the Moon-Eyed people legend provides a folklore explanation for who built them and why. If the legend has any historical core, it might point toward real underground features created or used by pre-Cherokee peoples. As North Carolina became more settled, and as interest in local history and folklore grew in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, accounts of mysterious underground features continued to appear in regional newspapers, local histories, and folklore collections. An 1892 newspaper article in a regional paper describes an expedition by several local men to investigate a reported tunnel entrance in a remote area of the mountains. According to the article, the men found an opening in a rock face that led to a passage with worked stone walls and a level floor. They explored for several hundred feet before the passage became too low and narrow to continue. The article speculates about the origin and purpose of the tunnel, but provides no definitive answers. A county history from 1905 includes an account of a cave discovered during railroad construction that revealed chambers with what the workers described as masonry walls and carved stones. The account claims the railroad company sealed the entrance after removing some artifacts, and that the location is now buried under fill or otherwise inaccessible. These later accounts differ from earlier ones in that they often appear in published, dated sources rather than being passed down orally or recorded decades after the fact. However, they still lack the kind of documentation, precise locations, photographs, systematic surveys that would allow verification or serious archaeological investigation. One challenge in evaluating these accounts is determining which represent genuine encounters with unusual features and which represent exaggeration, misunderstanding, or fabrication. Newspaper articles of this era often blurred the line between news and entertainment, publishing sensational stories to attract readers without rigorous fact-checking. Local histories, compiled by amateur historians, often included legends and hearsay alongside documented facts, but dismissing all these accounts as fabrication or error may be too hasty. Some likely describe real encounters with natural caves that seemed unusual to observers without geological training. Others may describe actual human-modified caves. Indigenous peoples certainly used and sometimes modified caves for various purposes, though whether these modifications created features that would appear as artificial tunnels is questionable. To assess the plausibility of large-scale underground construction in the Appalachians, it helps to consider documented examples of such construction from other parts of the world. The most relevant comparison is to the underground cities of Cappadocia in central Turkey, particularly the city of Derinkuyu. Derinkuyu is an underground city that extends to a depth of approximately 85 meters, with multiple levels, passages, chambers, and living spaces carved from soft volcanic rock. The city could accommodate thousands of people and included ventilation shafts, wells, storage rooms, stables, and defensive features. It was created over centuries, beginning possibly as early as the 8th century BCE, and was expanded and used by various peoples through history. The existence of Derinkuyu and other underground cities in Cappadocia demonstrates that large-scale underground construction is possible with pre-industrial technology when geological conditions are favorable. The soft volcanic tuff rock of Cappadocia could be excavated with bronze or iron tools, and the rock was stable enough to create large chambers without elaborate support structures. This raises the question, could similar underground construction have occurred in the Appalachians? Are the geological conditions similar? Was there motivation and capability for such construction among the indigenous or early historical peoples of the region? The geological answer is complex. The Appalachians lack the soft volcanic tuff that made Cappadocian excavation relatively easy. Much of the bedrock is hard metamorphic or igneous rock that would be extremely difficult to excavate in large quantities with stone or early metal tools. However, some limestone and marble formations in the region are more workable, and natural caves could have been expanded or modified rather than excavated from scratch. The cultural and historical context is different as well. The peoples of Cappadocia faced repeated invasions and persecutions that motivated creation of underground refuges. The construction occurred over many centuries with some level of state organization or community coordination. Equivalent motivations and organizational capacity may or may not have existed among Appalachian indigenous peoples. The Dirinkuyu example shows that we should not dismiss the possibility of substantial underground construction simply because it seems implausible. However, it also shows that such construction requires specific conditions: workable geology, strong motivation, sustained effort over time, and social organization that we would need to document in the Appalachian context before accepting claims of similar structures. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the legends of underground tunnels and structures in the Appalachians have been reframed and elaborated through modern media, creating versions that diverge significantly from the original historical and folklore sources. Books, television documentaries, and internet sites dedicated to mysteries and alternative archaeology have featured the Appalachian tunnel legends, often stripping away context and nuance in favor of sensational claims. These modern treatments tend to emphasize the most dramatic elements: secret tunnel networks, lost civilizations, suppressed evidence, while downplaying or ignoring the ambiguities and uncertainties inherent in the original sources. Some modern accounts connect the Appalachian legends to broader alternative history narratives, claims of advanced prehistoric civilizations, ancient global networks, or hidden knowledge suppressed by mainstream institutions. These framings often reveal more about contemporary cultural anxieties and desires than about the actual history of the region. Other modern treatments approach the legends from a cryptozoological or paranormal angle, suggesting that underground spaces might harbor unknown creatures, that mysterious disappearances in the mountains might be connected to tunnel systems, or that strange phenomena reported in the region relate to underground features. These modern elaborations make it difficult to examine the original legends on their own terms. When you search for information about underground tunnels in the Appalachians, you encounter layers of modern interpretation and speculation that obscure the historical and folkloric sources. For serious investigation, we need to distinguish between the core historical and folkloric traditions: Cherokee oral accounts, early settler descriptions, documented cave systems, and the modern elaborations that have accumulated around them. The core traditions may or may not point to real features worthy of investigation, but they deserve examination based on their own content, rather than through the lens of sensationalized modern retellings. The legends of underground structures in the Appalachians attracted the attention of amateur and professional archaeologists beginning in the late 19th century, though systematic investigation remained limited by the difficulty of the terrain, the vagueness of the claims, and the skepticism of mainstream archaeology. One of the earliest documented attempts to investigate came in 1897, when a group led by a state geologist examined several caves in western North Carolina that local traditions associated with unusual features or prehistoric use. The expedition's report, published in a state geological survey bulletin, documented natural limestone caves with evidence of indigenous use, pottery sherds, charcoal from fires, stone tools, but found nothing to support claims of artificial tunnels or constructed underground chambers. The geologist's conclusion was that the legends likely stemmed from encounters with natural caves that seemed impressive to observers unfamiliar with cave geology. He noted that limestone caves could have remarkably regular passages created by water flow, that they could extend for considerable distances, and that natural processes could create features, smooth walls, level floors, chamber-like expansions that might appear artificial to the untrained eye. This explanation became the standard scientific response to the tunnel legends. Natural caves, possibly modified slightly by indigenous peoples for specific uses, combined with folklore elaboration and misunderstanding, were deemed sufficient to explain the stories without invoking artificial tunnel construction. However, this explanation, while plausible for many accounts, does not address all the specific claims in the historical record. Some accounts describe features, carved symbols, masonry walls, regular architectural elements that go beyond what natural cave formation or simple modification would produce. Either these accounts are fabrications or exaggerations, or they point to something more substantial than the standard explanation acknowledges. One tangible piece of evidence often connected to legends of underground features is Judaculla Rock, a large soapstone boulder located in Jackson County, North Carolina, covered with petroglyphs, rock carvings of uncertain age and meaning. Judaculla Rock has been known and documented since the early 19th century. The carvings cover much of the rock's surface and include abstract symbols, possible anthropomorphic figures, and designs that have defied definitive interpretation. The rock is named after Judaculla, a figure in Cherokee mythology described as a giant or powerful spirit associated with mountains and hunting. Some researchers have suggested connections between Judaculla Rock and the underground tunnel legends. One hypothesis proposes that the rock carvings represent a map or diagram related to underground features, that the symbols encode information about cave locations or passage networks. Another suggestion is that the rock marks the location of an entrance to underground spaces, serving as a signpost or territorial marker. These interpretations are highly speculative. The carvings on Judaculla rock have been studied by archaeologists and rock art specialists, and while their exact meaning remains uncertain, there is no compelling evidence that they relate to underground tunnels. The carvings are consistent with other rock art found throughout the eastern United States, likely created by indigenous peoples for ceremonial, communicative, or artistic purposes that we may not fully understand, but that do not necessarily involve hidden tunnel systems. Nevertheless, Judaculla rock demonstrates that the region contains genuine prehistoric mysteries, unexplained rock art, sacred sites whose full significance has been lost, and this lends a certain plausibility to the idea that other mysteries, including undocumented underground features, might also exist. To distinguish between legend and reality, we need to understand what actually exists in terms of documented caves and underground spaces in western North Carolina. The region contains numerous known cave systems, primarily formed in limestone and marble formations scattered throughout the predominantly metamorphic bedrock. These caves have been explored, surveyed, and documented by speleologists, cave scientists, and explorers over many decades. One significant cave system is located in the Pigeon River Valley area. This system includes multiple caves with passages extending hundreds of feet, chambers of various sizes, underground streams, and typical limestone cave formations, including stalactites and flowstone. The caves show clear evidence of indigenous use. Charcoal deposits from torches, pottery fragments, and stone tools indicate that native peoples entered and used these caves for at least 2,000 years. Another documented system exists in the Nantahala area, where marble formations have been dissolved by groundwater to create passages and chambers. Some of these caves were known to Cherokee peoples and figure in local traditions. Archaeological investigation has revealed that the caves were used for shelter and possibly for ceremonial purposes, though the evidence is limited and interpretation is difficult. These documented caves are genuine underground features of considerable extent and interest. The question is whether they are what the legends refer to, or whether the legends describe something additional, features that have not been documented or that no longer exist. Comparing the documented caves to the legendary descriptions reveals both similarities and differences. The documented caves do extend for significant distances, do contain multiple chambers and connecting passages, and were used by indigenous peoples. However, they are clearly natural formations, lacking the artificial tunnel characteristics, regular dimensions, carved walls, architectural features that some legendary accounts describe. This suggests several possibilities. One is that the legends are entirely about natural caves, with the artificial characteristics being products of exaggeration or misperception. Another is that some caves were modified by indigenous use in ways that are subtle and difficult to detect archaeologically, but that impressed early observers. A third is that there are or were features that have not been documented, either because they are in remote, unexplored locations, or because they have been destroyed or sealed by natural processes. Archaeological evidence from throughout eastern North America demonstrates that indigenous peoples modified natural caves in various ways for different purposes. Understanding these documented modifications helps us assess what might be plausible in the North Carolina context. The most common modification was simple clearing, removing loose rocks, leveling floors, clearing debris to make caves more usable for shelter or storage. This type of modification would be archaeologically detectable through stratigraphy and sediment analysis, but might not be obvious to casual observers. Some caves show evidence of constructed features within them. Stone walls built to partition cave chambers, to create windbreaks at entrances, or to form storage caches have been documented in various locations. These walls used natural stones stacked without mortar, creating features that were clearly artificial but relatively simple in construction. Fire management features are common in caves used for habitation. Hearths were sometimes outlined with stones, and smoke-blackened ceilings show where fires were repeatedly lit. Ventilation was sometimes improved by clearing passages or creating openings to allow smoke to escape. More elaborate modifications are less common, but documented in specific contexts. Some caves sacred to particular indigenous groups show evidence of carved or pecked symbols on walls, of altars or platforms built from stone, or of dedicated ceremonial features. These modifications were usually limited in extent, but clearly artificial. Enlargement of natural passages has been documented in some cases. Where a natural cave passage narrowed to a constriction, indigenous peoples sometimes removed rock to widen the passage, making it easier to access chambers beyond. The scale of this enlargement was typically modest, removing enough rock to allow human passage, not creating large artificial tunnels. Could more extensive modifications have occurred in some locations? It is theoretically possible. If a natural cave system had high cultural value as a sacred site, a refuge, or a resource source, sustained effort over generations could have created substantial modifications. However, such extensive modification would require strong motivation, considerable labor, and appropriate geology, and we would expect archaeological evidence of the effort and the tools used. The documented evidence of cave modification shows that indigenous peoples were capable of and willing to alter natural caves, but within limits defined by available technology and practical constraints. Claims of artificial tunnel systems extending for miles would require evidence of effort and capability beyond what is documented elsewhere. One often overlooked fact in discussions of underground tunnels in the Appalachians is that artificial tunnels definitely exist in the region, but they were created by mining operations in the 19th and 20th centuries, not by ancient peoples. The southern Appalachians contain various mineral deposits that attracted mining activity. Copper, iron, mica, corundum, and other minerals were extracted through both surface mining and underground tunnel mining. Some of these mining operations created extensive tunnel systems that still exist, though many are now abandoned, flooded, or collapsed. The copper mines of North Carolina are particularly relevant. Copper deposits in the region were mined by native peoples in prehistoric times through surface collection and shallow digging, and were later exploited on an industrial scale by European and American mining companies in the 19th century. The industrial mining created shaft and tunnel systems extending hundreds of feet underground. One well-documented example is found in Ashe County, where copper mining in the mid-1800s created a complex of tunnels and shafts. After the mines were abandoned, the tunnels remained, and over time, knowledge of their exact extent was lost locally. When explorers or hikers occasionally encountered these old mine tunnels, not knowing their industrial origin, they sometimes interpreted them as mysterious ancient tunnels, feeding into the legends. This historical confusion between old mining tunnels and hypothetical ancient tunnels is significant. How many accounts of mysterious tunnels actually describe encounters with forgotten industrial mines? Without specific locations and careful investigation, it is impossible to determine which accounts might fall into this category. The existence of genuine artificial tunnels from historical mining also creates interpretive challenges. If someone claims to have found an artificial tunnel in the mountains, the first question should be whether it might be an old mine working rather than an ancient construction. Mining records from the 19th and early 20th centuries are incomplete, and many small mining operations were never officially documented. One specific site frequently mentioned in connection with underground tunnel legends is Fort Mountain in northern Georgia, just south of the North Carolina border. While technically outside our geographic focus, Fort Mountain is relevant because it demonstrates how genuine archaeological mysteries can feed into and become conflated with underground tunnel legends. Fort Mountain is named for an ancient stone wall that runs for about 850 feet along the mountain's ridge. The wall is genuinely mysterious. It was clearly built by human hands, probably between 500 CE and 1500 CE, but its builders and purpose remain uncertain. Cherokee traditions associate it with ancient peoples who inhabited the region before Cherokee arrival, and some versions of the Mooneyed people legend connect to the wall. Some researchers have claimed that Fort Mountain also contains tunnel entrances or cave openings associated with the ancient wall, and that these connect to underground passage systems. These claims have not been substantiated by systematic archaeological investigation. The mountain does contain natural crevices and small caves among the boulder fields, but nothing matching the descriptions of artificial tunnels. The Fort Mountain case illustrates how genuine archaeological mysteries, in this case, an unexplained ancient stone structure, can attract additional legendary elements, including claims of associated underground features. The verifiable mystery of the wall lends credibility to unverified claims about tunnels, creating a package of mystery that is difficult to untangle without careful investigation. To understand whether Cherokee accounts of significant underground features should be interpreted as describing artificial constructions or natural caves of cultural importance, we need to understand how Cherokee culture conceptualized and used caves. Caves occupied a special place in Cherokee worldview as entrances to the underworld, as dwelling places of powerful spirits, and as locations where the boundary between physical and spiritual reality was permeable. This spiritual significance meant that certain caves were approached with reverence, fear, or both, and that knowledge about them was often restricted rather than publicly shared. Some caves served practical functions. They provided shelter during hunting expeditions or journeys, offered storage for food or valuable items, and could serve as defensive positions during conflicts. The thermal stability of caves, maintaining relatively constant temperature year-round, made them useful for storing perishable goods. Ceremonial use of caves is documented in Cherokee tradition and supported by archaeological evidence. Some caves contain evidence of ceremonial deposits, intentionally placed objects that appear to be offerings rather than utilitarian debris. Fire pits in unlikely locations, arrangements of stones, and deposits of special materials all suggest ceremonial activity. Certain caves were associated with specific ceremonies or spiritual practices. Vision quests or other individual spiritual ordeals might involve spending time in a remote cave. Healing rituals sometimes incorporated cave locations, particularly caves with unusual acoustic properties or those associated with springs or water sources believed to have medicinal qualities. The restriction of knowledge about sacred caves was intentional and important. Not all caves were for public knowledge or use. Some were the province of specific clans, religious specialists, or initiated individuals. Revealing the locations or details about sacred caves to outsiders would have been culturally inappropriate and potentially dangerous, both spiritually and practically, as European colonists often desecrated or exploited locations once they learned of their significance. This cultural context means that when Cherokee traditions speak of significant caves or underground features, we should not expect complete public disclosure of details. The traditions may preserve knowledge about real locations while intentionally withholding specifics to protect them. This protective silence could explain why specific sites mentioned in legends have not been precisely located, not because they do not exist, but because their locations remain protected knowledge within Cherokee communities. Several organized expeditions in the early 20th century attempted to investigate tunnel legends, though with limited success and ambiguous results. In 1928, a group sponsored by a regional historical society organized an expedition to explore several sites in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where local traditions spoke of cave entrances leading to extensive passages. The expedition's journal, preserved in the Historical Society's archives, documents the exploration of 3 different cave systems over a 2-week period. The expedition found natural limestone caves, some quite extensive, with clear evidence of indigenous use. In one cave, they documented what they described as a stone wall partition approximately 20 feet long, built from stacked flat stones. The wall divided a large chamber into 2 sections and appeared to be ancient, though they could not date it precisely. They speculated it might have served to separate living space from storage space, or might have had ceremonial significance. However, the expedition found no evidence of artificial tunnels, no carved passages, and no architectural features beyond the single stone wall. Their conclusion was that legends of elaborate underground structures were exaggerations of natural caves, possibly combined with memories of the modest wall building they had documented. Another expedition in 1935, led by an amateur archaeologist with funding from a wealthy patron interested in regional mysteries, sought to locate what was described in local folklore as the entrance to the Great Underground. The folklore claimed that a specific mountain, the exact identity was disputed, contained a well-hidden entrance to passages that extended for miles. The expedition searched for 3 months, examining dozens of cave entrances and exploring numerous passages. They found nothing matching the folklore description. The expedition leader's report expresses frustration with the vagueness of the legends and the difficulty of searching vast mountainous terrain for features that might not exist or might be impossible to access. These early expeditions established a pattern that continues to the present. Serious searches for the legendary tunnels find natural caves, sometimes with evidence of indigenous use and modest modification, but do not find the elaborate artificial tunnel systems that the most dramatic versions of the legends describe. An unusual set of accounts emerged during and shortly after World War II, when military activities in the region led to encounters with caves and underground features that were sometimes described in anomalous terms. During the war, some remote areas of the Appalachians were used for military training exercises. Soldiers conducting exercises occasionally encountered caves and reported them to superiors. A few of these reports, preserved in military archives, describe features that seemed unusual to the reporting soldiers: caves with unusually regular passages, chambers with flat floors and vertical walls, or entrances that seemed artificially shaped. One report from 1943 describes a cave encountered during training exercises in western North Carolina that had a passage with what the reporting officer described as too regular to be natural. The report requested follow-up investigation to determine if the cave might be suitable for military use as a storage facility or shelter. Whether the follow-up occurred and what it found is not documented in available records. Another account from the same period describes surveyors working on a military mapping project who encountered a cave entrance that appeared to be partially blocked by worked stones, suggesting that someone had deliberately sealed or hidden the entrance. The surveyors reported the find, but did not investigate beyond the entrance. These military-era reports are intriguing because they come from trained observers with no apparent motivation to fabricate or exaggerate. However, they are also frustratingly incomplete. The specific locations are often vague or redacted in declassified documents. Follow-up information is rarely available. And the descriptions, while suggestive, are not detailed enough to determine what the observers actually encountered. One possibility is that the reports describe natural caves that seemed unusual to observers who were not geologists or speleologists. Another is that they describe old mine workings misidentified as natural caves. A third is that they represent genuine encounters with caves that had been modified or used by indigenous peoples in ways that left visible evidence. Linville Caverns, a commercial show cave in western North Carolina, provides a useful case study for understanding how natural caves can seem artificial and how commercial interests can shape public perception of underground features. Linville Caverns was known to local inhabitants for centuries before being developed as a tourist attraction in the early 20th century. The cave system is formed in limestone and contains passages, chambers, and an underground stream. When the cave was opened for commercial tour, promotional materials emphasized its extent, its beautiful formations, and its historical associations. Some early promotional materials for Linville Caverns made vague allusions to ancient mysteries, to legends of the cave's use by ancient peoples, and to passages that extended beyond the areas open to tourists. These promotional strategies, common for commercial caves, blurred the line between documented facts about the cave and legendary embellishments designed to attract visitors. Over time, some visitors to Linville Caverns came away with impressions shaped by the promotional materials and by the inherently impressive nature of the cave itself. A few incorporated their visits into larger narratives about underground tunnel systems, claiming that Linville Caverns was part of or connected to more extensive hidden networks. The reality is that Linville Caverns is a natural limestone cave of modest extent, roughly 2,000 feet of developed passages with additional unmapped sections. It shows clear evidence of natural formation and no evidence of artificial construction. But the case demonstrates how commercial interests, visitor imagination, and promotional embellishment can contribute to legends about underground features. Systematic archaeological investigation of cave sites in western North Carolina has been limited but informative. The work that has been done provides context for evaluating claims about artificial tunnels and extensive underground structures. Excavations in several caves during the mid-20th century revealed stratigraphy showing intermittent human use over thousands of years. The earliest evidence of cave use dates to the Archaic period, approximately 8,000 to 1,000 BCE, when hunter-gatherer peoples seasonally used caves as temporary shelters. The archaeological deposits in these caves consist primarily of hearth remains, discarded stone tools, animal bones from meals, and occasional fragments of woven materials or wooden objects preserved in dry cave sediments. This evidence indicates that the caves were used as campsites or short-term shelters, not as permanent habitations or as sites of intensive activity. Some caves show evidence of use during the woodland period, roughly 1000 BCE to 1000 CE, when pottery-making peoples with more settled lifestyles inhabited the region. Pottery sherds are the most common artifact from this period, along with continued evidence of fire use and tool manufacture or maintenance. A few caves contain burial evidence. Human remains, sometimes accompanied by grave goods, indicate that certain caves were used as burial locations. The practice of cave burial in the region appears to have been limited and selective. Not all caves were used for burial, and not all burials were in caves. This selectivity suggests that particular caves had special significance that made them appropriate burial locations. Crucially, the archaeological investigations have not revealed evidence of large-scale modification of caves or of artificial tunnel construction. The stone tools found in caves are typical of those used for hunting, food processing, and camp activities, not mining or large-scale excavation. There is no debris from tunnel digging, no accumulation of removed rock, no specialized excavation tools. This negative evidence, the absence of artifacts or features indicating tunnel construction, is significant. If artificial tunnels were being created in the region by prehistoric peoples, we would expect archaeological signatures of that activity. The absence of such signatures suggests either that artificial tunnels were not being created, or that they were created in locations or by methods that have left no detectable archaeological trace. A fundamental challenge in investigating the tunnel legends is the problem of verification. Even when specific claims are made about particular sites, verifying those claims is difficult for multiple reasons. First, the locations described in legends are often vague or deliberately obscured. Accounts speak of a cave in a certain general area without providing coordinates or precise landmarks. This vagueness makes systematic search impractical. You cannot search every cave in a mountain range based on a legend that says somewhere in these mountains there is a special cave. Second, the terrain is genuinely difficult. The mountains of western North Carolina include vast areas of roadless, densely forested, topographically complex landscape. Features that existed a century ago might now be obscured by vegetation growth, might have been altered by erosion or rockfalls, or might simply be difficult to locate without very specific knowledge of routes and landmarks. Third, some sites may be on private property where access is restricted. Property owners may not give permission for investigation, either because they are protective of their privacy, because they do not want their land disturbed, or because they are skeptical of the claims and do not want to encourage trespassing or unsupervised exploring. Fourth, even when a site is located and investigated, determining whether natural features are natural or modified can be difficult. Geologists and archaeologists can usually distinguish clearly artificial features from natural ones, but in ambiguous cases, features that might be natural or might be modified, interpretation can be contentious. Finally, there is the challenge of negative results. If an investigation searches for a legendary site and does not find it, this does not prove the site does not exist. It might be in a slightly different location than searched, it might be concealed or inaccessible, or the search methods might have been inadequate, but it also might not exist at all, and distinguishing between these possibilities is difficult. These verification challenges mean that the tunnel legends persist despite lack of confirmation. Believers can always argue that the sites have not been found yet, that they are being protected or concealed, or that investigations have been inadequate. Skeptics can point to the lack of verified evidence despite many years of interest and searching. In recent decades, several groups and individuals have undertaken exploration efforts specifically aimed at finding evidence of artificial tunnels or unusual underground features in the North Carolina mountains. Some of these efforts have been conducted by amateur researchers interested in mysteries and alternative archaeology. These investigators typically work without institutional support, funding their own expeditions and pursuing leads based on legends, local informants, or their own research into historical accounts. Reports from these amateur investigations are mixed and difficult to evaluate. Some investigators claim to have found anomalous features, cave passages with unusually regular dimensions, stone formations that might be modified, markings that could be artificial. However, these claims are typically not accompanied by rigorous documentation, professional geological or archaeological assessment, or publication in venues where claims can be peer-reviewed. Other amateur efforts have been more systematic and cautious. Some researchers have focused on documenting and mapping natural caves in the region, creating databases of cave locations and characteristics. While not finding evidence of artificial tunnels, these efforts contribute to understanding the actual underground landscape of the region. Professional speleologists, the scientists and serious hobbyists who study caves, have continued to explore and map cave systems in the region. New caves are discovered periodically, and known caves are sometimes found to be more extensive than previously documented. However, professional speleological work has not revealed evidence supporting the artificial tunnel legends. One persistent pattern in recent exploration is the discovery of caves that were known to local residents or to earlier generations, but that had been forgotten or were not widely known. The Appalachian region contains countless small caves and rock shelters that are locally known but not formally documented. When these are rediscovered by researchers, they are sometimes treated as new discoveries and occasionally generate renewed interest in the tunnel legends. To assess the plausibility of extensive artificial tunnel systems in the North Carolina Appalachians, we must understand what the geology permits and what it forbids. The bedrock geology of the region creates both opportunities and severe limitations for underground construction. The southern Appalachians consist primarily of metamorphic rocks, gneiss, schist, slate, and quartzite, formed when original sedimentary rocks were subjected to intense heat and pressure during the ancient mountain-building episodes that created the range. These metamorphic rocks are generally very hard and resistant to weathering, which is why they form the ridges and peaks of the mountain range. This hardness makes them extremely difficult to excavate with pre-industrial tools. Consider the practical challenge of cutting through hard metamorphic rock with stone, copper, or even early iron tools. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that creating even small openings in such rock requires enormous labor. To cut a passage large enough for a person to walk through, extending for any significant distance, would require removing tons of rock chips and dust, a process that would take many workers many years, even for modest tunnels. The limestone and marble formations scattered through the region are more workable, and these are where natural caves form through dissolution by groundwater. These softer carbonate rocks could theoretically be excavated or enlarged with pre-industrial tools more readily than the hard metamorphic rocks. However, the limestone and marble formations in the North Carolina mountains are not continuous over large areas, but occur as lenses and layers interbedded with the harder rocks. This means that any artificial excavation following these formations would be limited in extent and would encounter hard rock barriers that would be difficult to penetrate. The natural cave systems in the region formed over millions of years as slightly acidic groundwater dissolved the limestone and marble along fractures and bedding plains, gradually enlarging passages. This process creates caves with characteristic features: irregular passages following the path of water flow, chambers where passages intersect, stalactites, and other formations where mineral-laden water deposits calcite. These natural caves can be extensive. Some systems in the region extend for thousands of feet, but they have clear natural origins. The passages follow predictable patterns related to the geology. The formations show the chemical processes of dissolution and deposition, and the overall morphology reflects millions of years of gradual formation rather than purposeful construction. For artificial tunnels to exist on the scale suggested by some legends, miles of interconnected passages, chambers large enough to house many people, networks connecting distant surface locations, would require overcoming enormous geological and practical obstacles. Where would the excavated rock go? Removing thousands of tons of rock from underground passages would create massive spoil piles at the surface or require transporting the material away. No such spoil piles have been documented in locations where tunnel entrances are alleged to exist. What tools were used? Large-scale tunnel excavation requires not just hand tools, but also techniques for dealing with groundwater infiltration, for supporting unstable rock, for ventilating deep workings. The archaeological record of the region shows sophisticated stone tool technology, but nothing indicating mining or tunnel construction on the scale the legends suggest. The geological analysis suggests that while modest modification of natural caves is plausible and documented, extensive artificial tunnel systems cutting through the bedrock of the Appalachians would be extremely difficult to create with pre-industrial technology and would leave clear evidence of the excavation effort, evidence that has not been found. One crucial insight from geological and speleological research is that natural processes can create features that appear artificial to observers unfamiliar with cave geology. Understanding these natural mimics helps explain many accounts that describe seemingly artificial underground features. Passage regularity can result from natural processes. When groundwater flows through limestone along a consistent fracture or bedding plane, it creates passages with remarkably uniform dimensions. The passage width and height reflect the geometry of the original opening and the uniformity of the rock on either side. To someone walking through such a passage, especially with limited lighting, the regularity might seem too perfect to be natural, suggesting artificial construction. Wall smoothness is another natural feature that can seem artificial. Flowing water, especially water carrying abrasive sediment, can polish rock surfaces to a smooth finish over geological time. Some natural cave passages have walls that are smoother than could easily be achieved by hand tooling. Yet these smooth walls are entirely natural, products of millions of years of water flow. Right-angle turns and geometric chamber shapes can occur naturally where passages follow intersecting fractures, or where dissolution has enlarged the intersection of multiple fractures. A chamber with relatively flat floor, vertical walls, and horizontal ceiling might seem like an artificial room, but can form where horizontal bedding planes and vertical fractures provide planes of weakness that groundwater preferentially dissolves. Aligned passages can result from geological structures. If a series of parallel fractures exists in the bedrock and groundwater dissolves rock along these fractures, the result can be multiple parallel passages with similar orientations. On a map, this might look like planned tunnel construction, but it reflects the underlying geological structure rather than human design. Features that resemble architectural elements sometimes form naturally. Columns form where stalactites growing down from the ceiling eventually meet stalagmites growing up from the floor. Natural rock pillars can remain when surrounding softer material is eroded away. Shelves and ledges form where resistant rock layers remain after softer layers erode. False floors create the impression of artificially leveled surfaces. Cave passages can fill with sediment deposited by flooding, creating flat floors of sand or clay that look constructed. These sediment floors can be very flat and extend for considerable distances, appearing like intentionally leveled walkways. Lighting effects create illusions and misperceptions. In the limited and moving light of torches or early lanterns, cave features can appear very different from their actual form. Shadows can create the illusion of carved designs. Irregular surfaces can seem smooth. Natural features can look symmetrical or geometric when they are actually irregular. These natural phenomena explain many historical accounts of seemingly artificial features. An explorer encountering a natural cave with regular passages, smooth walls, flat sediment floors, and interesting rock formations, viewing everything in flickering torch light, might genuinely believe they had discovered artificial construction. The mistake would be understandable, not evidence of deception or poor observation, but simply lack of geological knowledge to distinguish natural from artificial. Beyond geological misunderstandings, psychological and social factors contribute to the formation and persistence of legends about underground tunnels and hidden chambers. Understanding these factors does not dismiss the legends, but helps us interpret them more accurately. Pattern recognition is a fundamental human cognitive process. We are evolved to detect patterns, to see connections, to recognize significance in our environment. This tendency serves us well in many contexts, but can also lead us to see patterns where none exist or to overinterpret ambiguous information. When people hear multiple stories about caves or underground features in a region, they tend to connect them into a coherent narrative. 3 separate accounts of unusual caves become evidence of a connected tunnel system. Disconnected folklore traditions get woven together into a single legend. The pattern-seeking mind creates connections that may or may not reflect actual relationships. Cultural transmission of stories inevitably involves elaboration and distortion. When stories are passed orally across generations, details change. Events become more dramatic, features become more remarkable, timelines compress or expand. A natural cave that was used for shelter becomes a constructed refuge. A passage that extended 100 feet becomes a tunnel extending for miles. This is not deliberate falsification, but the natural drift that occurs in oral tradition. The desire for mystery and significance influences how stories are told and received. People want their local landscape to contain remarkable features. A region with mysterious ancient tunnels is more interesting than one with ordinary natural caves. This desire does not create legends from nothing, but it influences which stories are remembered and retold, which details are emphasized, and how accounts are interpreted. Social reinforcement occurs when groups of people collectively believe and discuss legends. In communities where tunnel legends are widely accepted, newcomers are socialized into the belief, skeptical voices are marginalized, and the legend becomes part of local identity. Questioning the legend can seem like questioning community tradition or insulting local pride. Confirmation bias affects how evidence is evaluated. People who believe in the tunnels interpret ambiguous evidence as supportive, while people who are skeptical interpret the same evidence as contrary. A cave with regular passages is either evidence of artificial construction or an example of natural regularity, depending on the observer's prior beliefs. Motivated reasoning comes into play when people have investments, emotional, financial, or reputational, in the legends being true. Authors of books about the tunnels, tour guides who tell the stories, researchers who have devoted years to investigation, all these individuals have motivations to interpret evidence favorably and to discount alternative explanations. None of this means the legends are false or that all accounts are explainable through psychological factors. But it does mean we need to be cautious about accepting legend as history without corroborating physical evidence. The human tendency toward pattern-seeking, elaboration, and confirmation bias can create compelling narratives that are not strictly accurate. The underground environment creates unique perceptual challenges that contribute to misinterpretations and to accounts that describe features as more remarkable or mysterious than they actually are. Darkness and limited lighting fundamentally alter perception. Incomplete darkness, which is the natural state of deep caves, the human brain begins to hallucinate within minutes, creating phantom lights and shapes. Any light source, whether fire or electric, creates pools of visibility separated by darkness, fragmenting perception and making it difficult to understand spatial relationships. Moving light sources, such as torches or headlamps, create dancing shadows that can make static features appear to move or change. A natural bump on a cave wall can seem like a face or a carved figure when shadows shift across it. Passages can seem to curve or branch when they actually continue straight, as shadows obscure the true geometry. Scale perception is distorted in caves because there are few reference points. Without familiar objects for comparison, and with darkness concealing the full extent of spaces, chambers can seem much larger or smaller than they actually are. A passage might feel endless when it actually extends only 50 feet, or a chamber might seem modest when it is actually quite large. Sound behaves strangely in caves, creating acoustic effects that can seem mysterious or unnatural. Echoes, reverberation, and the propagation of sounds through connected passages create effects that can be startling or confusing. Dripping water can sound like voices or footsteps. The movement of air through narrow passages can create whistling or moaning sounds that seem otherworldly. Temperature perception is affected by the contrast between surface and cave environments. A cave at a constant 55 degrees Fahrenheit feels cold after entering from a summer surface temperature, but might feel warm after entering from winter cold. This can create the impression that caves have their own heat sources or that different sections have different temperatures when they actually maintain constant conditions. Spatial disorientation is common in complex cave systems. The three-dimensional maze of passages at multiple levels, the darkness, the lack of distant views, and the repetition of similar features all make it easy to become confused about direction and location. This disorientation can lead to genuine uncertainty about where you have been and what you have seen, making it difficult to accurately report or relocate features. Psychological effects of confined spaces, darkness, and isolation affect perception and memory. The stress and altered consciousness created by cave environments can lead to misperceptions during the experience and to distorted memories afterward. Features might be remembered as more dramatic or mysterious than they appeared at the time. These perceptual factors do not mean that all accounts of unusual cave features are unreliable. But they do mean that we should be cautious about accepting descriptions at face value, especially when the descriptions come from individuals who are not experienced cave explorers or who were in stressful or unusual circumstances during their observations. Many specific claims about underground tunnels and chambers in the North Carolina mountains can be explained through known natural or historical factors without invoking undiscovered ancient construction. The claim of passages with unusually regular dimensions most likely describes natural cave passages formed along consistent fractures or bedding planes. The regularity reflects the geometry of the rock structure, not artificial construction. Experienced speleologists can identify natural passages with remarkable regularity in many cave systems worldwide. The claim of carved or worked walls might describe several different phenomena. Natural dissolution patterns in limestone can create textures and designs that appear carved. Tool marks from historical mining operations can be mistaken for ancient carvings. And actual prehistoric markings, petroglyphs or pictographs created on cave walls, do exist in some locations but do not indicate tunnel construction, only use and modification of natural caves. The claim of stone walls or masonry in caves likely refers to walls built by indigenous peoples within natural caves to partition spaces, create storage areas, or provide wind protection. Such walls are documented in caves throughout eastern North America and represent modification of natural caves rather than construction of artificial tunnels. The claim of passages connecting distant locations probably reflects misunderstanding of how cave systems develop. Natural cave systems can indeed connect locations separated by considerable surface distance, with passages running beneath ridges or following circuitous routes through the rock. This natural connectivity can create the impression of purposeful tunnel construction when it is actually the result of geological processes. The claim of chambers large enough to house many people describes natural cave chambers formed where passages intersect or where dissolution has created large rooms. Some natural chambers in limestone caves are enormous, hundreds of feet long and wide, with ceilings dozens of feet high. These natural features are impressive enough to inspire awe and to support legends without requiring artificial construction. The claim of hidden or sealed entrances likely has multiple explanations. Some cave entrances are naturally difficult to find, hidden in dense vegetation, located in difficult terrain, or obscured by rock falls. Others may have been deliberately concealed by indigenous peoples to protect sacred sites from desecration. And some alleged hidden entrances probably do not exist, being products of legend rather than physical reality. The claim of passages that extend for miles is plausible for natural cave systems in limestone. Several cave systems in the region are documented to extend for thousands of feet or more. The longest cave systems in the Appalachian region include passages totaling several miles. These are natural formations, but their extent is sufficient to match legendary descriptions without requiring artificial construction. The claim of warm air or unusual atmospheric conditions in passages likely describes natural cave ventilation. Caves with multiple entrances at different elevations develop air circulation patterns as temperature differences create pressure gradients. This can result in air flowing through passages, sometimes with noticeable warmth if the air has been warmed in one part of the cave system before flowing to another. In nearly every case, the specific claims that make up the tunnel legends can be explained through some combination of natural geological features, historical mining operations, modest indigenous cave modification, and perceptual or interpretive factors. This does not prove that no unusual features exist, but it does show that extraordinary claims are not necessary to account for the evidence. Advances in geological survey technology provide new tools for investigating claims about underground spaces without requiring direct exploration of every cave and passage. These techniques can detect subsurface voids, map the three-dimensional structure of rock formations, and identify areas where caves are likely to exist. Ground-penetrating radar sends electromagnetic pulses into the ground and analyzes the reflections to create images of subsurface structures. GPR can detect voids, fractures, and changes in rock density to depths of 30 to 50 feet in ideal conditions, though penetration depth varies depending on rock type and moisture content. GPR surveys of areas where tunnel legends are concentrated could identify anomalous voids that might warrant further investigation. Electrical resistivity surveys measure how easily electrical current flows through different rock layers. Void spaces, water-filled cavities, and fracture zones have different resistivity than solid rock, creating anomalies that can be detected and mapped. This technique can penetrate deeper than GPR, sometimes revealing features hundreds of feet below the surface. Seismic surveys, similar to those used in petroleum exploration, can map subsurface structure by analyzing how seismic waves propagate through different rock layers. Large voids and major structural features can be detected, though the resolution is generally not sufficient to identify small passages or chambers. Gravity surveys detect minute variations in gravitational field strength caused by density differences in subsurface rock. Large voids create detectable gravity anomalies, though the technique is better suited to identifying major features than small passages. Electromagnetic induction surveys can map subsurface conductivity variations, identifying water-filled voids, fracture zones, and changes in rock type. The technique is particularly useful for detecting cavities in limestone. These geophysical techniques have been applied in various locations to search for caves, archaeological features, and subsurface voids. They are not perfect. They can miss small features, can produce false positives, and often require ground truthing through drilling or direct exploration to confirm what they detect. But they provide capabilities that were not available to earlier generations of researchers. If systematic geophysical surveys were conducted in areas where tunnel legends are most persistent, they would likely detect any large subsurface voids. The absence of such systematic surveys means that the question of hidden chambers or tunnels remains incompletely investigated. But if such surveys were conducted and found no significant anomalies, it would be strong evidence against the existence of large artificial tunnel systems. While we must keep an open mind about what evidence might reveal, geological science does allow us to identify claims that are virtually impossible given what we know about rock mechanics, cave formation, and the specific geology of the region. The claim of tunnel systems extending for tens or hundreds of miles through solid rock is geologically implausible. The longest natural cave systems in the world, like Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, formed over millions of years in extensive limestone deposits through dissolution. The limestone formations in the North Carolina mountains are not continuous over such distances, and creating artificial tunnels of such extent through the hard metamorphic rocks would be beyond the capability of pre-industrial technology. The claim of perfectly straight tunnels extending for miles is impossible in natural formations and implausible for artificial construction. Natural cave passages curve and meander following the path of water flow through the rock. Creating a straight tunnel through variable rock types, maintaining level and direction across miles, would require surveying capabilities and construction precision not available to prehistoric peoples. The claim of chambers with perfectly flat floors, smooth walls, and geometrically regular shapes is more consistent with modern industrial excavation than with either natural formation or prehistoric construction. While natural processes can create remarkably regular features, perfect geometric regularity suggests either exaggeration in the accounts or misidentification of features. The claim of underground cities comparable to Derinkuyu, but constructed in hard metamorphic rock, is technologically implausible. Derinkuyu was excavated in soft volcanic tuff that could be cut with bronze and iron tools. The metamorphic rocks of the Appalachians are many times harder, making equivalent excavation with similar tools effectively impossible. The claim of ancient ventilation systems, water supply infrastructure, or other engineered features comparable to what is found in documented ancient underground structures would require not just the ability to excavate rock, but also sophisticated understanding of airflow, hydrology, and structural stability. While indigenous peoples of the region were technologically sophisticated, there is no evidence they developed these specific capabilities. The claim of tunnel systems that have remained hidden despite intensive surface development, extensive forestry operations, road building, and other activities that disturb the surface is questionable. Major tunnel entrances, massive spoil piles from excavation, collapsed sinkholes above large chambers. These would likely have been encountered and documented during the extensive surface activities of the past 2 centuries. These impossible or highly implausible claims help us separate the most extreme legendary elaborations from accounts that might have some basis in physical reality. Not all versions of the tunnel legends make impossible claims, but those that do can be confidently identified as folklore rather than reliable accounts. A detailed examination of mining history in the region reveals how industrial mining operations contributed to tunnel legends in ways that are often unrecognized. Gold mining in North Carolina began in earnest in the early 19th century, with the state becoming a major gold producer before the California Gold Rush. Gold mining created both surface operations and underground workings, with tunnels following gold-bearing quartz veins into mountainsides. Many of these gold mines were small operations that were worked for a few years or decades, and then abandoned as the ore played out or became too difficult to extract profitably. The owners moved on, the mines were left open or were partially filled, and over time, knowledge of their exact locations and extent was lost. When these abandoned mine tunnels were encountered decades or centuries later by people who did not know the mining history of the area, they could seem mysterious. A tunnel with worked walls, tool marks, and a level floor entering a mountainside and disappearing into darkness might be interpreted as an ancient construction rather than a 19th century mine. Mica mining also created underground workings. Mica was valuable for industrial uses, and North Carolina mica deposits were extensively mined in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Mica mining often involved following mica-bearing pegmatite veins underground, creating tunnels and excavations that could be mistaken for much older constructions. Copper mining, as mentioned earlier, created some of the most extensive historical tunnels in the region. The copper mines, with their networks of shafts, tunnels, and chambers, are genuine artificial underground structures. When knowledge of their industrial origin is lost or not known to people who encounter them, they can seem to be mysterious ancient tunnels. Iron ore mining created surface operations primarily, but also some underground workings where ore veins were followed into hillsides. These too could be mistaken for ancient features by later observers unfamiliar with the mining history. Limestone quarrying, while primarily a surface operation, sometimes involved excavating into hillsides to follow particularly pure limestone deposits. The resulting excavations, with their worked walls and artificial geometry, could be misidentified as tunnels or chambers of mysterious origin. The historical record of all these mining operations is incomplete. Many small mines were never officially registered. Maps showing mine locations were lost or never made. As miners and their children died or moved away, local knowledge of where specific mines had been located was lost. This lost mining heritage almost certainly accounts for some accounts of mysterious tunnels. How many? Without systematic investigation correlating tunnel accounts with mining records and on-the-ground verification of abandoned mine locations, it is impossible to say. But the possibility that some or even many accounts describe industrial mines rather than ancient constructions must be seriously considered. An important factor in investigating tunnel legends is the limited access to many caves in the region due to conservation concerns, private property restrictions, and safety considerations. Cave ecosystems are fragile and easily damaged by human visitation. Formations can be broken by contact, delicate mineral deposits can be destroyed, hibernating bats can be disturbed with fatal consequences, and unique cave-adapted organisms can be harmed. As awareness of cave ecology has grown, access to many caves has been restricted to protect these vulnerable environments. Private property encompasses many caves in the region. Landowners may restrict access to protect their property, to avoid liability for injuries to unauthorized visitors, or simply because they value their privacy and do not want people exploring their land. Even when landowners would be willing to allow access for legitimate research, the legal and insurance complications can be prohibitive. Safety concerns are legitimate barriers to cave access. Caves can be dangerous environments with risks of rockfall, flooding, bad air quality, getting lost, and various other hazards. Responsible cave exploration requires training, equipment, and experience. Limiting access to those with appropriate skills and preparation reduces accidents. These access limitations mean that systematic investigation of all caves in a region to search for evidence related to tunnel legends is not practical. Many caves have not been professionally surveyed or archaeologically investigated simply because access has not been available. This creates an epistemological challenge. We cannot prove that unusual features do not exist in caves we have not investigated. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence when evidence has not been systematically sought in many locations. But we also cannot assume unusual features exist simply because we have not investigated everywhere. The reality is that thorough investigation of tunnel legends would require access to many caves on private property, cooperation from landowners, resources to conduct systematic surveys, and professional expertise to distinguish natural from artificial features. Without this comprehensive investigation, the legends remain neither proven nor definitively disproven. Despite the many alternative explanations, natural phenomena, and historical factors that account for most tunnel legend elements, some aspects remain genuinely puzzling or unexplained. The consistency of legends across different sources and time periods is notable. While consistency alone does not prove truth, widely distributed legends can still be false, it does suggest that something more than random invention is involved. Consistent legends often have some kernel of truth, even if that truth has been elaborated and transformed beyond recognition. The specific geographic concentration of some accounts is intriguing. If the legends were purely invented folklore, we might expect them to be evenly distributed across the region. Instead, certain specific locations are mentioned repeatedly in different sources. This geographic specificity suggests that something about those particular locations, perhaps impressive natural caves, perhaps historical features, perhaps something else, anchors the legends. The persistence of the legends, despite skeptical dismissal and lack of physical confirmation, suggests they serve important cultural functions or tap into deep-seated interests. Understanding why these legends persist might be as important as determining their factual basis. Some specific historical accounts resist easy explanation. While most accounts can be attributed to natural caves, mining history, or perceptual factors, a few describe features that do not fit these explanations neatly. These outlier accounts might be fabrications, might be based on features that no longer exist, or might point to something we have not yet identified. The possibility of lost or destroyed features should not be dismissed too quickly. Natural processes, rockfalls, erosion, sedimentation, can seal cave entrances or collapse passages. Human activities, mining, construction, deliberate sealing, can eliminate or obscure features that once existed. It is possible that some features described in historical accounts genuinely existed, but are no longer accessible or have been destroyed. The protective secrecy surrounding sacred sites might mean that some features exist, but their locations are deliberately not revealed to outsiders. Cherokee communities might have knowledge of specific caves or underground features that they choose not to publicize to protect sites from damage or desecration. This protective silence should be respected, but means that public knowledge of the region's underground features is incomplete. After examining the legends from multiple perspectives, historical, geological, archaeological, and cultural, we can now assess what the accumulated evidence actually supports regarding underground tunnels and chambers in the North Carolina Appalachians. The evidence clearly supports the existence of extensive natural cave systems in the region, formed primarily in limestone and marble deposits through dissolution by groundwater over millions of years. These natural caves can be impressive in scale and extent, with passages running for thousands of feet, chambers large enough to house dozens of people, and complex networks of interconnecting passages at multiple levels. This is not speculation, but documented fact, confirmed by systematic cave surveys conducted over many decades. The evidence also supports indigenous use of caves in the region, extending back thousands of years. Archaeological investigations have documented fire pits, pottery sherds, stone tools, and occasional burials in various caves, demonstrating that native peoples entered caves, used them for shelter and storage, conducted ceremonies in them, and regarded certain caves as significant locations. This too is established fact. The evidence supports modest human modification of some natural caves. Stone walls built to partition cave chambers, cleared passages, fire management features, and possibly some enlargement of natural openings are documented or plausible based on evidence from similar contexts. This level of modification is consistent with documented indigenous cave use elsewhere in eastern North America. What the evidence does not clearly support is the existence of extensive artificial tunnel systems, miles of carved passages, constructed chambers, engineered networks connecting distant locations of the type described in the most elaborate versions of the legends. Despite more than a century of interest in these legends, despite numerous searches and investigations, no such features have been definitively documented and verified by qualified professionals. This absence of confirmation does not prove the features do not exist. It is possible they are in locations that have not been searched, that they are hidden or inaccessible, or that they were destroyed by natural or human processes. But the lack of physical evidence after extensive searching is significant and shifts the burden of proof to those making extraordinary claims. The most plausible interpretation of the evidence is that the legends are rooted in encounters with impressive natural caves, some showing evidence of indigenous use and modest modification, combined with oral tradition elaboration confusion with historical mining tunnels, and the human tendency to create mystery narratives around partial information and ambiguous features. This interpretation accounts for the legends without requiring phenomena that geology and archaeology suggest are implausible. It respects the cultural significance of caves in Cherokee tradition without accepting all legendary elements as literal fact. And it remains open to future discoveries that might reveal features not yet documented. Even if we conclude that the legends do not accurately describe vast artificial tunnel systems, they retain profound cultural and historical significance that deserves respect and attention. For Cherokee communities, traditions about caves and underground spaces are part of cultural heritage that connects contemporary people to ancestors and to the landscape. These traditions encode knowledge about the land, preserve historical memories, and express spiritual understandings of the relationship between humans and the earth. Their value does not depend on whether every detail is literally true in the way modern Western culture defines truth. Cherokee epistemology, the way of knowing and understanding the world, does not neatly separate factual description from spiritual meaning, historical event from mythological interpretation, or physical geography from sacred landscape. Traditions about underground spaces integrate all these dimensions, and evaluating them solely on the basis of whether they describe verifiable physical features misses much of their significance. The respectful approach is to recognize that Cherokee traditions contain genuine knowledge about the landscape, including knowledge about caves and their cultural importance, while also recognizing that these traditions may express that knowledge in forms that differ from Western scientific documentation. This requires cultural humility, acknowledging that other knowledge systems are valid on their own terms rather than valid only insofar as they conform to Western scientific standards. For the broader regional culture of Appalachia, the tunnel legends are part of local folklore that expresses relationships to the mysterious and often daunting landscape of the mountains. The legends speak to themes of hidden knowledge, of mysterious pasts, of the power of the land, and of things that remain unknown despite modern science and technology. These themes resonate because they tap into genuine aspects of human experience in the region. The mountains are mysterious, vast, complex, full of hidden places and unknown features. The past is obscure, much of the region's deep history is genuinely unknown, and prehistory is documented only fragmentarily. And there is something psychologically powerful about the idea that beneath the familiar surface world lies a hidden realm waiting to be discovered. Understanding the legends as culturally significant folklore does not diminish them. Folklore is a valid and important form of cultural expression, encoding values, preserving memories, and creating shared narratives that bind communities together. The tunnel legends deserve study and preservation as folklore, even if they do not accurately describe physical features. The investigation of tunnel legends provides broader lessons about how we evaluate evidence, form beliefs, and distinguish between what we know and what we want to believe. The relationship between evidence and belief is not as straightforward as we might wish. Strong beliefs can persist despite lack of supporting evidence or presence of contradicting evidence. People continue to believe in the tunnels despite the absence of verified discoveries because the belief serves psychological or cultural needs that are independent of physical evidence. This is not unique to tunnel legends. Many beliefs about historical events, about unseen entities, about future possibilities, persist with varying degrees of evidence supporting them. Understanding why beliefs persist regardless of evidence requires looking beyond the evidence itself to the functions the beliefs serve. The tunnel legends serve multiple functions. They make the local landscape more interesting and significant. They provide a sense of mystery and possibility in a world that can seem fully mapped and explained. They offer connection to an imagined past that is more mysterious and powerful than documented history. They create narrative hooks for tourism, for local pride, and for individual identity as someone who knows about or investigates mysteries. These functions are not trivial. Humans need meaning, mystery, and connection to place. If the tunnel legends provide these, their truth value in a strict factual sense may be secondary to their psychological and cultural value. However, distinguishing between functional belief and factual belief is important. We can appreciate the tunnel legends for their cultural significance, enjoy them as folklore, and recognize the human needs they address, while also being clear about what the physical evidence does and does not support. The danger comes when functional belief masquerades as factual belief, when folklore is presented as suppressed history, when cultural narratives are defended as scientific truth. This conflation creates false certainty, leads to poor decision-making, and can harm both scientific understanding and cultural appreciation. The tunnel legends are most valuable when appreciated for what they are: a rich folklore tradition rooted in genuine features of the landscape and genuine cultural history, elaborated through oral tradition, serving important psychological and cultural functions, but not equivalent to a verified archaeological or geological account of actual artificial tunnel systems. For those who wish to continue investigating the tunnel legends, either as researchers or as interested amateurs, several ethical considerations should guide their efforts. First, respect for indigenous knowledge and cultural sovereignty is paramount. Cherokee traditions about caves and underground spaces are cultural property belonging to Cherokee communities. Investigation that treats these traditions merely as clues to be extracted, that ignores Cherokee perspectives on whether and how sites should be investigated, or that proceeds without Cherokee involvement and consent, is ethically problematic. Proper investigation requires building relationships with Cherokee communities, seeking guidance about cultural protocols, obtaining consent for any work that affects culturally significant sites, and ensuring that Cherokee voices are central to interpretation and presentation of findings. Second, respect for private property and legal boundaries is essential. Much of the land where tunnel legends are centered is privately owned. Investigating without landowner permission is trespassing. Even on public land, regulations about cave access, archaeological investigation, and resource collection must be followed. Responsible investigation works within legal frameworks, obtains necessary permissions and permits, and respects the rights of landowners and the regulations designed to protect caves and archaeological resources. Third, environmental responsibility requires minimizing impact on cave ecosystems. Caves are fragile environments easily damaged by human visitation. Responsible cave exploration follows established protocols for low-impact caving, staying on established routes, not touching formations, not disturbing wildlife, packing out all trash, and limiting group sizes. Archaeological sites in caves are particularly vulnerable. Disturbing archaeological materials, removing artifacts, or altering sites destroys irreplaceable information. Investigation of archaeological features should be conducted only by qualified professionals using appropriate techniques and with proper permits. Fourth, intellectual honesty requires accurately representing findings, acknowledging uncertainties, distinguishing between evidence and interpretation, and being open about the limitations of investigation. Claiming to have found proof of artificial tunnels when evidence is ambiguous, presenting speculation as fact, or selectively reporting evidence that supports preferred conclusions while ignoring contradictory evidence violates intellectual integrity. The public and the scholarly community deserve honest reporting of what has been found, what it might mean, and what uncertainties remain. Sensationalism might attract attention, but it undermines credibility and makes serious investigation more difficult. Fifth, safety must be a priority. Cave exploration is inherently hazardous. Proper training, appropriate equipment, experience-based decision-making, and never exploring alone are essential safety practices. Investigators who lack proper training and equipment endanger themselves and create burdens for rescue teams if they become injured or lost. If serious, systematic investigation of the tunnel legends were to be undertaken, what would constitute an adequate approach? Comprehensive historical research should compile and analyze all historical references to underground features in the region. This includes not just the well-known published accounts, but also archival research in county records, newspaper databases, personal papers, and other sources that might contain references to cave discoveries, tunnel encounters, or unusual underground features. This historical compilation should document the specific claims made, the locations referenced however vaguely, the sources of the accounts, and any patterns that emerge from analyzing multiple accounts together. Oral history collection from Cherokee communities and from longtime residents of the region could capture knowledge and traditions that have not been written down. This should be conducted respectfully, with clear understanding that not all knowledge will or should be shared, and with Cherokee collaborators as equal partners in determining what information is gathered and how it is used. Geological mapping and analysis should identify all areas where caves are likely to exist based on bedrock geology, document known cave systems comprehensively, and use modern geophysical survey techniques to search for undocumented voids in areas where legends are most concentrated. Archaeological survey of documented caves should be expanded to provide systematic documentation of indigenous cave use, evidence of modification, and dating of human activity. This would establish the baseline of what is known about actual human-modified caves, against which claims of more extensive artificial features could be evaluated. Targeted investigation of specific sites where accounts converge or where preliminary evidence suggests unusual features should be conducted by professional teams combining speleological, geological, and archaeological expertise. Any features claimed to be artificial should be rigorously documented, analyzed by multiple independent experts, and subjected to dating and provenance studies. All findings should be published in peer-reviewed venues where they can be critically evaluated by the broader scholarly community, not just presented in popular media or self-published works, where sensational claims are not subjected to critical scrutiny. This comprehensive approach would require substantial resources, funding for fieldwork, access to private lands, cooperation from multiple institutions and communities, and years of sustained effort. It has never been undertaken. Without such systematic investigation, the tunnel legends will remain in the realm of unresolved folklore and speculation. The North Carolina tunnel legends are part of a broader worldwide phenomenon of legends and claims about hidden underground structures, secret tunnels, and subterranean realms. Examining this broader pattern provides perspective on the Appalachian legends. Underground tunnel legends exist in many cultures and regions. Europe has legends of extensive medieval tunnel networks beneath cities, of secret passages connecting castles and monasteries, of hidden chambers beneath ancient sites. South America has legends of Incan tunnel systems, of underground cities, of hidden gold in subterranean vaults. Asia has traditions of temple tunnel networks, of underground martial arts training grounds, of concealed passages beneath palaces. In most cases, these legends are exactly that, legends based on kernels of truth, but elaborated beyond the factual reality. There are genuine historical tunnels in many locations, escape routes from castles, smuggling tunnels, mine workings, drainage systems, but they are typically much more modest in extent than the legends suggest. The pattern worldwide is that limited underground features, natural caves, modest artificial tunnels, drainage systems, become elaborated into legends of vast networks. The elaboration serves narrative purposes, creates mystery and interest, and taps into the psychological power of the hidden and the underground. The underground has archetypal significance in human psychology. It represents the unconscious, the hidden, the mysterious, the realm of death and rebirth. Underground journeys appear in mythology worldwide as initiatory experiences, as descents into the underworld, as quests for hidden knowledge. This archetypal power means that underground spaces naturally attract legend and speculation. The Appalachian Tunnel legends participate in this universal human fascination with what lies beneath the surface, with hidden realms and secret knowledge. Understanding this broader context does not prove or disprove specific claims about the Appalachian tunnels, but it does suggest caution about accepting extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence. The pattern worldwide is that legends of vast tunnel systems are usually greatly exaggerated compared to physical reality. The persistence of the tunnel legends, despite lack of confirmation and despite alternative explanations for most accounts, speaks to the important role that mystery plays in human experience and culture. Mystery is psychologically valuable. It creates space for imagination, for wonder, for the possibility that reality contains more than what is already known and documented. In a world that can seem fully mapped and explained, mystery provides relief from the sense that everything is already discovered and understood. Landscapes need mystery to remain engaging. The Appalachian Mountains, stripped of all mystery and reduced to fully documented geological formations and catalogued biological communities, would be less compelling than mountains that might contain hidden caves, unknown features, and undiscovered secrets. Mystery motivates exploration and investigation. The possibility that something remarkable might be hidden beneath the surface inspires people to explore, to search, to investigate, activities that have value independent of whether the specific mystery turns out to be real. The tunnel legends, even if they do not describe actual artificial structures, serve the valuable function of maintaining mystery in the landscape, of suggesting that the region still holds secrets, of keeping alive the spirit of exploration and discovery. However, mystery should not be confused with ignorance or with deliberate obscurantism. Healthy mystery is compatible with honest acknowledgement of what is known and what is not known, with following evidence where it leads, and with updating beliefs when evidence warrants. The tunnel legends can remain valuable as mystery and folklore, even as we honestly assess that the physical evidence does not support the most dramatic versions of the claims. We can appreciate the mystery while being clear about the difference between what we imagine might be true and what the evidence actually supports. The investigation of tunnel legends has broader implications for how archaeology approaches indigenous sites and how indigenous knowledge is valued in archaeological research. Traditional archaeology has often treated indigenous oral traditions as interesting folklore to be noted, but not as reliable sources of factual information about the past. This reflects cultural biases that privilege written documentation and physical evidence over oral transmission, and that assume Western scientific methods are the only valid ways of knowing about the past. More recent collaborative archaeology recognizes that indigenous oral traditions can preserve accurate information about past events, locations, and practices, sometimes over many generations. Archaeological research that incorporates indigenous knowledge as a valid and important source, rather than merely as colorful background, often produces better results. The tunnel legends present a challenge for collaborative archaeology. If we take Cherokee traditions about significant underground spaces seriously, we should investigate whether those traditions point to real features that can be documented. But investigation must be conducted in ways that respect Cherokee cultural protocols and that recognize Cherokee communities as partners rather than merely as sources of information. This means that some knowledge might not be shared publicly, that some sites might be protected rather than excavated, and that Cherokee perspectives on what findings mean should be given equal weight with archaeological interpretations. It also means being honest about uncertainty and about the limitations of both archaeological evidence and oral tradition. Not every tradition will be verifiable through archaeology. Not every archaeological finding will have clear connections to oral traditions. The relationship between traditional knowledge and archaeological evidence is complex and requires careful, respectful negotiation. The tunnel legends specifically show both the potential value and the limitations of oral tradition as historical evidence. The traditions clearly contain knowledge about caves and their cultural importance, knowledge that archaeologists should take seriously. But the traditions also contain elements that may be spiritual or mythological rather than literal descriptions of physical features, and distinguishing between these elements requires cultural understanding and respect for indigenous interpretive frameworks. What is likely to happen with the tunnel legends in the coming years and decades? Several trends and possibilities can be identified. Digital documentation and online discussion will continue to spread and elaborate the legends. Internet forums, YouTube videos, blog posts, and social media allow rapid dissemination of claims, images, and theories. This increases public awareness, but also increases the mixture of accurate information with speculation and misinformation. The challenge will be maintaining critical thinking and evidence standards in an online environment where sensational claims spread faster than careful analysis, where anyone can present themselves as an expert, and where conspiracy thinking finds receptive audiences. Continued amateur investigation will occur as individuals and groups pursue the legends out of curiosity, desire for discovery, or conviction that mainstream science has overlooked or suppressed evidence. Some of this investigation will be responsible and may contribute useful documentation. Other investigation will violate ethical standards, damage sites, or produce misleading claims. The role of professional gatekeeping, peer review, institutional vetting, professional standards will be contested. Some will see professional skepticism as closed-mindedness or suppression. Others will see amateur claims as lacking rigor and reliability. Tourism and commercialization may develop around the legends in ways that both preserve and distort them. Tour operators might offer trips to sites associated with the legends. Local businesses might use tunnel imagery in branding and marketing. This could bring economic benefits, but also creates incentives to exaggerate or fabricate. Indigenous perspectives may become more central to discussions about the legends if Cherokee communities choose to engage publicly with the questions. Greater recognition of indigenous knowledge and increased indigenous control over how their cultural heritage is researched and presented could shift how the legends are investigated and interpreted. New technologies for remote sensing, cave exploration, and archaeological analysis may allow investigation of sites and features that were previously inaccessible or difficult to study. These technologies might settle some questions or might reveal new mysteries. Climate change and environmental shifts may alter access to caves or expose features that were previously hidden. Increased flooding might make some caves inaccessible, while droughts might lower water tables and expose previously flooded passages. The legends will likely persist regardless of whether physical evidence is found, because they serve cultural and psychological functions that are independent of their factual basis. As long as the mountains remain mysterious and humans remain drawn to mystery, stories of hidden tunnels and underground chambers will continue to be told. After this comprehensive examination of the legends of underground tunnels and chambers in the North Carolina Appalachians, what can we conclude? The most important conclusion is that the legends are neither pure fabrication nor accurate description of vast artificial tunnel systems. They occupy a middle ground, rooted in real features of the landscape and real cultural history, but elaborated and transformed through oral tradition, misidentification, and the human tendency to create mystery narratives. The real features that anchor the legends include impressive natural cave systems formed in limestone and marble, genuine indigenous use of caves with evidence of modest modification, historical mining tunnels from 19th and early 20th century operations, and the cultural significance of caves in Cherokee tradition and spirituality. The elaborations and transformations include conflation of different caves and features into imagined networks, exaggeration of cave extent and regularity, misidentification of natural features as artificial constructions, confusion of historical mining with ancient building, and addition of mysterious or romantic elements that make better stories than mundane reality. The geological evidence does not support the existence of extensive artificial tunnel systems carved through the hard metamorphic bedrock of the region. The technology required, the labor involved, and the absence of archaeological evidence for such construction make the most dramatic versions of the legends implausible. The archaeological evidence documents indigenous cave use and modest modification, but does not reveal the artificial tunnels, constructed chambers, or engineered features that would be expected if the legends described reality. The historical evidence consists primarily of anecdotal accounts that are difficult or impossible to verify, that often describe features that can be explained through natural caves or historical mining, and that show the patterns of elaboration typical of folklore. The cultural evidence shows that caves held and continue to hold significant meaning in Cherokee tradition, that knowledge about specific caves may be protected and not publicly shared, and that respectful engagement with Cherokee communities is essential for ethical investigation. This assessment is not the final word. Future discoveries could reveal features that change our understanding. More systematic investigation using modern technologies and proper methodology might document significant caves or modifications that have not yet been recognized. Increased collaboration with Cherokee communities might provide access to knowledge that is currently protected. But based on the evidence currently available and the investigations conducted to date, the most reasonable conclusion is that the legends of a forbidden city under the Appalachians, of vast artificial tunnel networks of subterranean chambers housing ancient populations, are folklore, culturally significant, psychologically compelling, perhaps rooted in fragmentary truths, but not accurate descriptions of verifiable physical features. The journey into the legends of underground tunnels beneath the North Carolina Appalachians has taken us through layers of evidence, interpretation, and meaning. We have examined Cherokee traditions and European settler accounts, explored documented caves and geological constraints, analyzed perceptual factors and historical confusion, and considered what can and cannot be known about what lies beneath the mountains. What emerges is not a simple answer to a factual question, but a complex story about how humans relate to landscape, how legends form and persist, how different knowledge systems understand reality, and how mystery functions in culture and consciousness. The mountains do contain secrets. Vast networks of natural caves wind through the limestone formations, many unexplored or incompletely documented. Unknown species may inhabit the eternal darkness of deep caves. Archaeological sites in caves preserve evidence of ancient human presence that has not been fully studied. And the sheer scale and complexity of the mountain landscape means that new discoveries are always possible. But the specific secret of the legends, the artificial tunnel systems, the subterranean city, the forbidden chambers, appears to be a secret of a different kind. It is a secret not of hidden physical features, but of human imagination, cultural memory, and the deep psychological power of the underground as symbol and archetype. This does not diminish the legends. Understanding them as folklore, as cultural expression, as stories that serve important psychological and social functions, can make them more interesting and valuable than treating them as factual claims that are either true or false. The legends tell us that people have always been drawn to the mystery of what lies beneath the surface, that the underground represents the unknown and the powerful, that caves are thresholds between the ordinary world and something stranger and more mysterious. They tell us that indigenous peoples had profound relationships with the landscape, including its underground dimensions, that this relationship was expressed in traditions that integrated practical knowledge with spiritual meaning, and that this knowledge remains significant in contemporary Cherokee culture. They tell us that European settlers encountered a landscape they did not fully understand and created stories to make sense of what they experienced. Stories that mixed observation with speculation and that evolved through retelling. They tell us that humans need mystery in their lives and in their landscapes, that we resist the idea that everything is already known and explained, and that we preserve space for wonder and possibility through stories of hidden realms and undiscovered secrets. The Forbidden City under the Appalachians may not exist as a physical place, but it exists as a powerful idea, as a story that captures something true about human nature and about our relationship with the landscape we inhabit. The mountains remain mysterious, not because they hide impossible wonders, but because they are vast, complex, and still imperfectly known. New caves are discovered, unknown features are occasionally revealed. The landscape continues to surprise and to resist complete mapping and explanation. This is the real mystery, and it is enough. We do not need artificial tunnel systems or underground cities to make the Appalachians worthy of awe and exploration. The mountains, as they are ancient, eroded remnants of even more ancient mountains, riddled with natural caves formed over millions of years, inhabited by humans for thousands of years who left traces we are still discovering, home to ecosystems we are still studying, are remarkable enough. The legends of underground tunnels and chambers are part of the cultural landscape of the region, as much a part of its heritage as the physical caves and mountains. They deserve to be preserved, studied, and appreciated as folklore and cultural expression, even as we are clear about distinguishing folklore from documented fact. For those who explore the mountains, whether as hikers enjoying the surface beauty or as cavers penetrating the underground darkness, the legends add a layer of mystery and possibility to the experience. Knowing the stories, even if we do not believe them literally, makes the landscape richer and more engaging. For Cherokee people, the traditions about underground spaces remain part of cultural heritage that connects them to the landscape and to ancestors. These traditions hold meanings that go beyond questions of physical verification and that deserve respect regardless of what archaeologists and geologists conclude about artificial tunnels. For all of us, the legends remind us that mystery is valuable, that the unknown should not be feared but embraced, and that some of the most important truths are found not in what we can prove and document, but in the stories we tell and the meanings we create. The Forbidden City under the Appalachians may not exist beneath our feet, but it exists in our imaginations, in our cultural traditions, in our relationship with landscape and with mystery. And perhaps that is where it has always truly been, not in tunnels carved through rock, but in the human capacity to wonder, to imagine, to create stories that give meaning to the world around us. The mountains keep their secrets. Some of those secrets are physical, unknown caves, undocumented features, evidence waiting to be found. Others are the secrets of meaning and interpretation, of how we understand our place in the landscape, of how we relate to the deep time of geology and the deep history of human presence. Whether artificial tunnels exist beneath the North Carolina mountains remains an open question, though the evidence suggests they do not. But the legends themselves are real, the caves are real, the human relationships with underground spaces are real, and the mystery that draws us to explore and to imagine is real. In the end, that may be the most important truth to emerge from this investigation. The value of mystery is not in the factual claims it makes, but in the questions it raises, the exploration it inspires, and the meaning it allows us to create as we engage with a landscape that is endlessly complex, endlessly surprising, and endlessly worthy of our attention and respect. The mountains stand, as they have for hundreds of millions of years, wearing away slowly under the patient assault of water and wind and time. Beneath their surface, caves extend through the rock, formed over geological ages, holding darkness that is profound and eternal. And through the mountains and the caves, humans have moved for thousands of years, creating relationships with the land, telling stories about what they found, imagining what might lie in the unexplored darkness. The Forbidden City under the Appalachians, whether it exists in physical form or only in story and imagination, is part of this long human history of exploring, wondering, and creating meaning in the landscape. The legends will persist because they serve needs that transcend factual accuracy. And the mountains will keep whatever secrets they hold, revealing them slowly if at all, maintaining the mystery that makes them endlessly fascinating to every generation that encounters them.